Hello, hello. This is Kyle Russell here, and I am holding on to a large and substantial river-worn jade. And what this webinar is all about is green stones. I'm going to rest this down because I'm going to come back to it in a few minutes. So this webinar is about green stones. I also had called it the top 4 green stones. And green stones are actually one of my favorites. It's really hard to choose because there are so many great stones. And if you don't know me, let me introduce myself first. I'm Kyle Russell, and I have 2 companies, crystalconcentrics.com, which focuses on the metaphysical modality of working with crystals and crystal energy. And I also have powerstonecrystals.com, which is the buying and selling of crystals. And the reason I separate them is because one is more sort of strictly spiritual and the other has a sort of merchant aspect to it, which a lot of people sort of put lower. But the fact is that when you're working with crystals, you are working with material objects. And so you've got to buy and sell them. You've got to acquire them somehow. And I got into the buying and selling business of working with crystals because I wanted a supply for myself. And over time, what I find is that people who are really serious about working with crystals will upgrade as they go along. They'll say, I got a really nice little stone here, but when I can afford or find a better stone, a better variety, a better quality piece of that variety, then I'm going to sort of trade up and keep trading up. And some people will spend thousands of dollars on one stone. But what we're here to do in this webinar, which is part of the Why It's Awesome series, is to sort of take off a little snippet of the grand crystal tree of life and look at one particular part of it. And I have chosen for this particular episode of the Why It's Awesome series, green stones. And before we get into the specific ones, I want to talk a little bit about the chakra system, okay? Because the chakra system is a basic and intrinsic way in which we can sort of organize how different stones pertain to our own body and energy system. And I've created a sort of a different type of way to think about the chakra system. And there are 3 things I love about these webinars that I want to just sort of put out there right up front. One is, you should know, and I try to put in all of my descriptions, that if you miss any webinar that's scheduled, you can always access the replay link. So once you sign up, nowadays the technology is evolving so quickly that there are new features being added all the time. So currently you have the option when you sign up for one of these webinars to check off a box that will let you be automatically subscribed to future webinars so that you can get the links for the live webcast as well as the replay links. So that's a great, great feature. Another feature that I just started using recently was a Q&A. So you should have in the right-hand side of your screen a sort of dialogue box, kind of like when you're texting someone. And I really love to answer questions live. When you signed up, you had the option to fill out a survey, and I got a lot of responses. I thank you for that. And I think some of your questions are going to be answered. You can feel free to type in your questions. They come to me privately, and then I'll answer them as I'm able. And if there's not time, I'll definitely be able to write you individually later on to answer those questions. Now, a brand new feature that I'm going to try to share with you here is called a pop-in. And it's going to enable me to share with you an offer for a poster that I created. Okay, so I'm going to load that. And I'm going to display the offer. So hopefully you can see on the side of your screen the poster that I've created. What it does is it breaks the chakra system into 4 parts. Foundation is solar plexus down, then comes heart, then comes voice, and then comes source. Now, I've created a much more complex system than what you may be used to. Usually, the standard chakra system starts with red at the bottom and then goes slowly up and follows the logic of the colors in the rainbow. So what that does is it puts the heart chakra sort of squarely in the middle and associates it with the color green. Okay? So when we're talking about green stones, we are, if we use the chakra system, we are associating those green stones with our heart chakra. So the first stone I'm going to show you is actually malachite. So this is a wonderful and extraordinarily good quality malachite. And I can't get into it right now, all the complexities and the subtleties of my language of crystals, but I will tell you that if we know that green is the color associated with the heart, and we know that, I haven't told you this yet, but if you know me and have worked with me, the color black is associated with openness. So when it comes to malachite, we're talking about the energy of emotional expression, opening up of the heart. Now, you may have heard the expression green with envy. That came out probably in the Middle Ages, but somehow even then people were associating the color green with the heart. Now, in my system, and you can click through to find out more, it'll open up in a different page, a different tab. So you don't have to worry about cutting me off. If you want to check that out, feel free. But I have actually 6 stones associated with the heart chakra, which usually people think of in terms of pink, like a rose quartz or something. But the power of malachite is that it's able to open up your heart. And notice this one has a lot of light green as well as darker green and black. I have a personal preference and think that it's a little bit stronger of a power stone to use a malachite that actually has more black than green in it. I think what it does is it opens you up deeper and more quickly. But I feel like this is the type of malachite that's more accessible. Now, all of these stones, and this is number 1 of the top 4 green stones. It's associated with the heart chakra, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, powerful stone. But as with many power stones, you can have 2 tiers. You can have the more powerful version and the less powerful version of a stone. So I'm going to show you this right here. Now look at that similarity. You've got lots of black, you've got lots of green, you've got swirly shapes, an interesting pattern. This is called crocodile jasper or kambaba jasper. It's also even called a stromatolite. And a stromatolite is a stone that is formed from fossilized algae. So it has some biological origin, unlike this, which is formed just chemically. But what's interesting is that it does curl and sort of swirl in a sort of semi-biological way, like a bubbling cauldron. So this material here, as beautiful as it is, if you had to choose, you would choose this if you wanted to spend less money. But the funny thing about malachite is that it's plentiful enough that you can get a great piece of malachite for under $100. So I really do like malachite as one of the top 4 power stones. I will say that, and I'm going to show you a link to it later, but this is sort of a fun kind of teaser, get involved with crystals in like 30-40 minutes. But I have full hour webinars that I have archived that you can pay to access. And they tackle bigger topics like the whole language of crystals, how to work with crystals. I actually did one on crystals that you can find on Pinterest. I've done several of them, and I'll share with you that archive a little bit later. But for right now, I want to explore a little bit more about the top 4 green stones. So this is a heart stone, and I have another heart stone, and this is the stone I was carrying earlier at the beginning of the webinar. This is jade. This has long been my favorite piece of it. It's river worn. It's from North America, and it has a very soft feel and touch to it. Okay, that comes from hundreds or thousands of years of being swished around in the water, in a river. Some of these are found off the west coast of California. They're ocean jades. And what's interesting about ocean jade or any kind of naturally worn jade is that it's very soft to the touch. It almost has a waxy feel to it. And more than any other stone that you can find, it sort of approximates the touch of human skin. So this, when you feel it, you've got your touch factor, because one of the things that I've talked about in one of those other webinars is that there are 3 gateways to the soul. When it comes to working with crystals, there's the sense of touch, there's the sense of sight, and of course with touch, it's not just the surface, but the density and the weight of a stone. So the last sort of gateway into the soul is your imagination. What you do with this information, what you do with what it is that you're seeing, what you're feeling, what kind of context you put it into, that's where the sort of magic and chemistry comes in to make crystals effective and useful in your life. I was having a conversation with someone at an expo. They were dealing with a tumor. And I said to them, you know, it's not, I'm working on a blog as well on this topic. It's called, It's Not About the Crystals, Silly, right? I made a little bit light of it because really the crystals are the beginning. They are wonderful. They are fantastic in and of themselves, but it's the interaction. I call it a participation sport. It's the interaction of you and the crystals, and I find often when there's more than one person, there's like a group, like I lead meditations and workshops, that there's a certain kind of magic that happens when more than one person is interacting and we're putting our minds together and our imaginations together to work with the crystals, that we can move our own personal process, whether that be biological in terms of an illness or a psychological malady. Whatever it is that you're struggling with can be improved by taking the crystal into your hands and by working with someone who knows what they're doing to guide you through the process and experience of a crystal healing or wellness session, or, you know, the learning in and of itself can be very healing. So jade is and I'm not doing these in any particular order because you could prioritize these 4 stones in a number of different ways. But what I love about jade is it's automatically relaxing. It's the ultimate soothing stone. And what's interesting, this is nephrite jade. Nephrite jade is the most accessible type of real jade in any kind of substantial size. Now there's another type of jade I'm going to show you. This is called new jade, okay? You can see the difference. Nephrite jade is always darker. There is jadeite, which is lighter and usually gets reserved exclusively for jewelry making. But this material, the new jade, is a lot cheaper than nephrite jade. And that makes it a lot more accessible to people. You can find a piece like this for not a lot of money. You could find one for $5 or $10 or $50, whereas a piece like this of nephrite jade with this nice harmonious shape might be as much as $100. So as I was mentioning with the malachite, you have these sort of little siblings or lesser versions, younger versions, or not as powerful versions, because I don't want to make a sibling feel worse for being younger. I'm a younger sibling myself. So what you can do is access the new jade, which is really a type of serpentine, and there are lots of serpentines that are much cheaper than nephrite jade and more accessible. They're cut into all kinds of shapes, and they do have that sort of natural, soft, soothing touch that jade is so good at. And you can get out of a new jade more, I think, energetically than you'd be able to get out of a Kambaba jasper. If what you were looking for was the malachite experience, you should just get yourself a malachite. This is wonderful because it's beautiful, but if you're looking for the feel of jade, you will get that with a nice colored new jade that's polished. You don't find it rough and natural and water softened the way that my other big piece there is. But when you polish a stone, there are some people who say, oh, I only want rough stones because that's the way they were originally created, and that's the only way I can really feel the energy. But what you'll find, like in some of my other webinars, is that I believe that polished stones can give you great, great access to what's inside. Every stone is like a little package of natural energy. And when you can access that, you're able to partake of and incorporate and assimilate that energy that comes inside of the stone. Now, the next stone I'm going to talk about is a very intense stone. So I don't know if anybody can guess what it would be, but if you look over, your colors appear in multiple places. And this is, again, all sort of having to do with the human body and the chakra system as it extends down below you and also up above you. There are people who have chakras counted up into the hundreds. I tend to try to simplify things, although I do have 29 stones featured on my poster. Now, what I want to talk about is how there are certain themes that appear at different parts of your body. You'll notice from the poster, there are some dark colors down low, and then they appear in the middle, and then they appear up higher. So the same is true with the color green. So rather than be limited by the chakra system and say, well, if it's green, it can only have to do with the heart, then what has happened for me in my understanding of the language of crystals, because I did a webinar called Crystal Myths, I actually disagree with a lot of what has been printed out there in the literature, the crystal lore. And I won't get into those areas of difference that I have with a lot of what you may have seen in the books. But I will say that I have my own source of information. And one of my webinars, of course, tells the story about how I got into this about 30 years ago. So, and that has to do with the next stone I'm going to talk about. So let me show you a piece of it. Maybe you recognize this. I'll put it as close as I can. This is a moldavite. All right. Now, I mentioned the idea that some of these energies can appear multiple places. And part of my language of crystals says that if a stone is translucent, it has more to do with the spirit than strictly the body. Now you will notice that the malachite and the jade are not translucent, all right? And they happen, as I explained earlier, to have more to do with the body. And the green appearance in the body is in the heart chakra, all right? So when we talk about a translucent stone, we talk about skipping up a level. We're taking the heart from just simply your own heart to self in relation, but on a higher spiritual level that has to do with spirit community, okay? So with the Moldavite, my experience was quite intense, and I won't tell the story. It's a great story, but I will promise you, if you don't have a story for Moldavite, ask any of your friends who have it or who have experienced it. Moldavite is a very intense green stone that brings in or taps us into higher intergalactic alien energy. So it's not just the location of being far away up in the cosmos, but it's a connection with actual spirits such as the aliens who travel intergalactically, and many have said have come to visit us here on Earth for any number of purposes and with any number of outcomes. So when I feel a Moldavite, when I hold a Moldavite like this, there's a sensation that starts to happen in my hand that's unlike anything else I've experienced. What happened, just to give you a little history, the Moldavite was formed after a meteoric collision with the Earth in Eastern Europe. And what often happens with meteoric collisions, a lot of the iron meteors are simply iron from space that has come down and landed here. What happens with this type of material is it's like a meteoric glass, the way that obsidian is meteoric glass coming up through volcanoes out of the earth. The Moldavite is caused by a hot fusing of elements from space and from Earth. And I've done a fair amount of reading on this. I know there's a lot more said, but that's probably about as much as I can tell you about it, except that when it explodes, it gets all kinds of pockmarks, like the cratered moon surface. And I'm going to show you something very similar. Have a look at this here. So this is not really green. You can kind of see that this is a greenish, the color of the Moldavite. But this, in my other hand, is a black tektite, which is formed in exactly the same way as the Moldavite. The difference is that the tektite is, as in the other top four stones, a kind of a lesser version of the Moldavite. So someone might get a pretty big kick out of this. It's also huge. If this were a piece of Moldavite, it would probably be costing into the thousands. But a piece like this can be more like 100. It's black. It's very harmoniously shaped. It has the cratering that the Moldavite has. It just doesn't have the same energetic kick of the Moldavite. What I'm going to do is show you a couple of other pieces. Because the Moldavite doesn't come very big, it tends to be turned into jewelry. So here's a really nice piece of jewelry I'm going to show you. It's set in sterling. Often that's the case, although you could put it in gold as well. It seems to be a nice match. Here's another piece that I think is kind of interesting. It's a little hard to see the surfacing, but it doesn't have the cratering. It's more like it's cubic or crystallized, and that's very unusual. So Moldavite comes in a number of different forms. It ranges from greener to blacker. the greener is more valuable. Here's one that looks quite black, but if you get the light just right, you can see a little bit of the greenness. So if what you're trying to do is connect the spirit in a kind of extreme way, then moldavite is definitely the stone for you. A lot of people like it. They like to wear it on their body. I personally had not actually worked with it since I first experienced it because I had a strange and kind of negative experience. So it's only recently that I've been getting back into the moldavite just to have it because I know people appreciate it and want to buy it. But what happened for me very early in the game was that I discovered a different version of that experience of spirit community, and I discovered it through the stone green fluorite. So here's a gigantic green fluorite. And what I like about fluorite is that it's not explicitly associated with the alien energy. The green fluorite is a stone that takes you there. It lifts you up to that level, but it doesn't do so in a way that detracts or takes away from your earthly experience. One of the things that I like about it is when it forms naturally in a pyramidal shape. So I'm going to show you this one has a pretty good pyramid right there. And this one over here has a kind of flawless double pyramid shape, okay? This is what we call an octahedron. So with an octahedron, what you're dealing with is an upward pyramid and a downward pyramid. And that is the union of heavenly and earthly forces. Now, this piece was created by cleaving a large, massive amount of green fluorite. And it's possible, if you know what you're doing, to cleave it just so. Nowadays, you don't see them so well, but there were a lot of fluorite octahedrons that came out of the US that were cut so perfectly, like this one, that they really looked like they naturally formed as a perfect octahedron. So this is, to me, like the highest form that a crystal can take. I like points because they can direct energy, and I love all kinds of clusters. But if I had to choose one shape, the sort of ultimate shape for a crystal to take, and diamonds take this shape, scheelite takes this shape, spinel does as well, I would pick the octahedron as super, super sublime. So what we have here is stones that are very explicitly associated with the body type of green, and stones that are associated with the spirit type of green. So I'm going to just remove this offer. If you want to click through for the poster, you can get a look in a different tab at it, because I'm going to show you a different offer now. And this one is going to be for my other webinars where I explore in a lot more detail all of these themes. So you can see there, I've got webinar classes. They're about an hour long, but they're super, super dense and packed with information, just the way this type of webinar is. But what I love about this webinar is we can be a little bit lighter and I can answer your questions. So you should be able to click on your chat and submit some questions. I'll be taking a look at them in a few minutes to be able to answer them as well as I can. If I can't answer them, or if it doesn't immediately apply to the topic, I might have to email you. So feel free to leave a comment. As it happens, you're supposed to be able to leave chat comments and questions even on the replay version of the webinar. So I want to show you actually another green fluorite. So have a look at this one. You see how it's got that pyramid shape, and it's got some other crystals. This funny little crystal here is actually a calcite. So this is your octahedron, except that it's 100% natural. So this was not cleaved because you can see the surface is all crystallized and frosty. A natural octahedron is that much more rare, and to some people that much more valuable than a cleaved perfect octahedron like that. But look at that color, that's hard to beat. And sometimes you got to be okay with a cluster that has pyramidal fluorite in it. Over here I have one last fluorite to show you. This is a wonderful freeform cut Madagascar green fluorite. A lot of the green fluorite that you see comes from China, but some of the Madagascar material is ridiculously great in color and texture, and good quality carving as well. So I recommend, if you get some green fluorite, look around, maybe get a few different pieces, because they all have a slightly different energy. And I don't agree with the idea that if you get, one quartz, if you see one quartz, you've seen them all. Every one is slightly different, has its own energetic personality or fingerprint or what it is that it brings to the table. So you can click on my webinar archive listing. It might actually be on that side of your screen. Things are a little turned around when you're the presenter. And I want to sort of wrap up my show and tell presentation aspect of this webinar by sharing with you one more stone, which I had referred to in my video teaser about this webinar. And this is it right here. So some of you will know immediately what this is. It's a different color than the fluorite, although some fluorites do come in this color. It generally comes from Africa and forms around epidote, which is a dark green and sometimes still resembles and parallels tourmaline. Now tourmaline, of course, comes in different colors, famously in green also. But you'll notice I have not put tourmaline in my top 4. The top 4 are for the heart, jade and malachite, and for the spirit, moldavite and green fluorite. Now this material is a prehnite. Okay, prehnite is very cool. I call it the mineral aloe vera. It's a very soothing stone. But what's so interesting about it is that it's green, so you can surmise some sort of heart or community or relationship situation, including with your body, the idea of healing your body. But it's a little bit translucent, unlike the jade. Now, of course, some jade can be translucent. If you cut it thin enough, light will come through. But what is interesting about the prehnite is it sort of holds it straddles the spiritual because of the translucency and the heart, okay, because of the green. And so for me, and I'm actually wearing a pendant of it right now, what I like about the prehnite, it has the soothing quality of a jade. Here again. And it has the spiritual elevated quality of a fluorite. So it's a kind of a marriage of those two energies. So that was your bonus stone for today. To reach me, you may or may not have been in touch. If you sign up for these webinars, you automatically get onto my newsletter list. So have a look for that and make sure to add me in your address book so that my communications don't get lost in the spam folder. We are going to go to our Q&A section, and I'm not sure if we have any questions, but what I'm going to do is give you a chance. If you want to click through to the webinar archive, it opens in a different tab that you can refer to later and still come back to me to hear the rest of our webinar experience talking about the top 4 green stones. So I've removed that offer, and I'm now in the chat section, and I'm seeing something here that's not going to pertain. I'm wondering, just try somebody. Oh, here we go. Here we go. It does work. I was a little concerned about that. We have something here from Suzanne. She says she has a piece that she loves to wear for more than half or 3/4 of the day, and it makes her feel very edgy. So I can only imagine she's talking about moldavite, but she hasn't told me. So Suzanne, if you can hear me, please type in what it was, the name of the stone that you were wearing so often. And I want to see some of you other people type in some questions. There's got to be something that I've said that makes you think, well, what about this? Or how about that? Or maybe something unrelated. I'm not so sure. So here I'm seeing another note. Does a deeper green fluorite bring a greater heart connection? And is darker more expensive? That is an excellent question. I love that question. Unfortunately, the sidebar here is not showing me your name, so I apologize. I'm going to address some people by name, some by not, but we'll try to just work with the content. So the question about darkness. A darker green fluorite is a more intense and powerful fluorite than a more pale version. This, as wonderful as it is an octahedron, gets its energy from its shape. The color is not as important in a piece like this, or this one right over here. The color really matters, and this color is actually not as common as you might think, especially since a lot of the fluorites get mixed with purple or other colors, and I do a whole webinar on fluorite, and if you want to check that out, definitely be in touch. Kyle@crystalconcentrics.com, that's your best way to reach me. You can also write me Kyle@powerstonecrystals.com, and both of those will get to the same place. So I definitely recommend the deeper color when it comes to green fluorite. Now, I got a question here. It was Denise who had asked me about the depth of colors. The names show as things bounce down. So please, everybody else, I know there are a bunch of you out there. I want to see your questions, because that's what's so fun about this, is we can answer these questions live and get a real good sense of where each of us is coming from and what might be a priority for each of us. So my latest question is, what's the deal with green tourmaline? Okay, green tourmaline I find to be a very advanced stone, just like emerald is. Okay, emerald is another green stone that I absolutely love, but it's not as immediately accessible or useful as these other four stones. Tourmaline, green tourmaline, is the same thing. Now, when I'm holding a moldavite, I get a pretty substantial charge from it. So, and they only come small. Some green tourmaline can come bigger, but green tourmaline tends to come small. And to me, it doesn't really pack the punch that some of these other stones pack. So it falls off of the list of the top stones that are green. So that's how I feel about tourmaline. Oh, that's Katie. Cool. Nice. So now I'm getting a response about, it was moldavite. I think it was moldavite that Suzanne was talking about that was giving her that intense experience. To me, if you're going to wear a stone, now you should know that part of the reasons they don't make jewelry out of fluorite is that it's very brittle. It cracks. So it's not strong enough to be a great jewelry stone. Some of these others, even though moldavite is volcanic glass, it has been through the ringer and it survived. So moldavite is strong enough to be made into lasting jewelry. So of course is jade. Jade is supposed to be quite a hard substance, and malachite falls into the easy to break material. Okay, So people don't generally, people will take a malachite and they'll put it into a cabochon because that can be nicely wrapped around and protected. But nobody really facets malachite. It doesn't make sense because part of the excitement of having a malachite is actually seeing the natural surface. In this case, what's happened is it's been polished to sort of take down any of the edges and give you a sense of the black on the inside. So that's a little bit more about polishing and what stones lend themselves to which type of treatment. So I got a nice little note from Teresa here. She said she heard me from the kitchen. I love that you are listening to this even in your busy life. That's a very cool thing to do. In fact, I'm working on putting together some podcasts so that you don't even have to deal with the visual and the signing in and all that complicated stuff. But she asked what was the alien stone, and of course it was the moldavite. There's a very, I'm going to bring that a little closer again so you can see the texture of it. I actually have a great idea for this particular piece. I want to have 2 pieces of silver hook in from underneath and then have it loop behind and then come through this little open collar that you see and then loop up so that you can put a chain through it. So unless I sell this piece to someone else who has that plan, I'm holding on to it until I find just the right jeweler who will be able to convert it into a great piece of jewelry. So the question that Suzanne had was about the double pyramid and is it man-made? So the double pyramid is, well, certainly we've seen the pyramids that the ancient civilizations have built. The ones in South America and also the most famous ones in Egypt. The Egyptian ones are very smooth-sided. The South American ones tend to have steps. It's interesting because the Egyptian ones actually do have steps too, but they're so massive that the actual detail of those steps is lost from a distance when you look at the pyramid. So the pyramid being man-made, I did say that this was cleaved, which means they hack into a chunk of fluorite. So if you have a big piece like this, but it's not a pretty cluster, or you saw off the top layer and you get the nice cluster, but you have a bunch of undefined raw fluorite like this, you may be tempted, if you know that it cleaves well, to chop it, to hack it so that it breaks in such a way that you can create this type of a shape. Now, something I don't have to show you right now is a polished octahedron, which is another artificially created octahedron, and they just do that with cutting and polishing. So, here's a great question. Thank you. Natalie is asking, what exactly should you feel if the stone is working for you? That is such a great question. And it depends on the stone. Now, for me, if I'm holding a moldavite right now, I'm not actually trying to make an alien connection. I'm not actually trying to channel in a specific alien energy. So what happens for me is that it's just sort of buzzing me in a weird kind of way. And it doesn't feel that biologically healthy or enhancing to my own sort of earthly organismic functioning, all right? So for me, I know that that feeling that I'm getting from that stone means that it's not really working for me in a way that I would really like it to. Conversely, when I was holding this, before the webinar began, I was a little bit nervous. I wasn't sure I was going to cover all the content that I wanted to get to. But when I hold a smooth, it slows me down from talking. It takes me out of the intellectual. It takes me out of the sort of verbal processing side and quiets me down. It takes me right down into the heart, soothes me right through my skin, right through the soft touch to my hand. And that's when I know that it's working for me. So you probably have some more specific questions about that, but I'm going to hope that you can email me with some of these questions. I'm going to keep going because there's some great questions still coming through. Here's another question from Katie C. It seems like there's a lot of green stones, like more than other colors. Is that just my personal lens, or are there really more green stones than others? LOL. You know, I agree. There are a huge number of green stones, and it seems like there are more green than other. But to tell you the truth, because I have a Pinterest page, and you should definitely feel free to find me. All of my newsletters list my Pinterest handle. You can look under Crystal Concentrics or Crystal's Power, and you'll find my Pinterest boards. And I do several of those boards by color. So I actually think there are more blue stones than green stones. But if you go there and look, I just pick out whatever's outstanding on Pinterest and I add it to my boards. And I have a ton of green stones, but I also have a ton of blue stones. But they're very prevalent. Green is definitely prevalent. So it's hard, but in some ways easy. It was easy for me to pick out the top 4 green stones. So here's another question. Why is green better as a heart chakra stone over rose quartz? Excellent question. I could switch back, but I'd be happy to email you and explain more about that because I have a whole webinar devoted to the heart chakra. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 6 stones associated with the heart chakra. And some may be more important to me than others. But I would not say that the green is that much more important that it trumps the pink, because the rose quartz of unconditional love, you can't, there's nothing like unconditional love, and none of the greens offer that. The greens offer more of a self in relation experience, okay? So in this case with the green fluorite, you're talking about self in relation to spirit community, maybe your spirit guides, angels, and such like that. If you're talking about the jade, you're talking about self in relation to your feelings. How am I, can I calm down? Can I be in touch with my feelings? I'm going to be looking at some malachite, okay? If I want to experience my heart as connected to an alien race that may have brought me or you or others here, or be lurking out there somewhere, then the moldavite is of course going to be a very useful and valuable tool. So I hope that answers your question. I don't mean to prioritize one over another. In fact, there are other really, really important stones in the heart chakra that you will want to learn about if you click through to my webinar link, my archive. So, oh, here's someone saying they want one. One of these stones that I picked up, you want. And I can't blame you, because everything that I sell, and I have thousands of stones, and I've sold so many, but every stone that I sell, I have had to buy first. So that means I have to like it enough to want to have it in my collection to share it with you. Or if you don't buy it and I'm stuck with it, I have to feel great about it. So there's hardly any stone that I have, in fact, I can't think of any, that I wouldn't be happy to hold on to. That's why I'm not invested in making a quick buck and selling, you know, moving product as if it was a commodity, like a tomato soup off of the shelf at the supermarket. The crystals are too special to just sort of throw, to sort of pass and throw like a bag of sand. So here's another question. I keep an octahedron fluorite on my laptop at work. It seems to reduce the negative energy that I experience with computers. Any thoughts on this? Also talk about serpentine and infinite. Okay, infinite is a newish kind of stone. And I mentioned this in my other stuff, but we're on such a roll with all your Q&A. I'm having fun with it. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're coming up with some questions to shoot my way. But infinite fits into that quality, into that group or category of stones like merlinite, merlinite, for example, is gabbro. It's a stone that's always been there, but someone's discovered it and sort of put a trademark on it and told you all sorts of wonderful things about it. And it's true that a lot of those unusual, new age, renamed stones like auralite actually do have awesome qualities. Infinite is one of those that I've been asked about, I haven't even seen. So I have no opinion about what it is or what it does. The other stone that you mentioned is serpentine. Now, I did mention before that the new jade is actually a kind of serpentine. And serpentine comes in a lot of different forms. Some are less translucent. I think the more translucent they are, the closer they are to approximating the useful energy of a jade. Okay, so I do like serpentine, and it is a much cheaper option than the nephrite jade. However, there's no substitute for the actual nephrite jade. So I hope that answers your question about serpentine. Teresa is observing that this looks like an arrowhead. Well, I gotta tell you, that's part of why I picked it, because I look for a very distinctive shape. If it's not going to be sort of round and harmonious, I want it to have some interesting texture, like this one here does. As I was mentioning earlier, it almost looks like a crystallized cubic formation. And that's what I don't just pick out any moldavite. It's got to be a special one, and I also have to feel something from it. There's a lot of fake moldavites out there, and a lot of moldavites that I think are treated just as a quick commodity, and they don't have that zing that you really want to find. I got a thank you here. Thanks, Beatrice. That's great. I've got a question. I'm not sure. Diana has a question, and I'm not sure what I haven't answered. Oh, yes. She talked about the octahedron as a way of dealing with EMF. Now, I happen to believe that if you're around computers or cell phones and such like that, that the best detoxifier is actually smoky quartz. So I'm going to put smoky quartz way above any other stone as far as having that capability and desirability. I love the octahedron idea of having it around, but I think that if you're going to work with an octahedron, you want to have a real sort of conscious thing going on where you're engaging those heavenly and earthly energies in a way that is usually more personal and energetic and goal-oriented, like as in a meditation or a healing session. I'd rather see you use an octahedron in that type of a context than simply as an ornament on your desk, because there are other people who come in, it picks up on other people's energies, and I just feel like you want to keep that a little bit more privately. So I've got one question, which is, it's so hard to scroll up, and I use Fuchsite for my PC, darn. Whoever asked that question about Fuchsite, Fuchsite is a really interesting green stone that I've just been discovering recently. I like the look of it. I'm not getting much energy from it. So I don't love it, although I got some really crazy wands of Fuchsite. So it looks like I don't have any new questions sort of bursting in. If you have one, please send me one, because I'm going to be wrapping up the Q&A section of the webinar right now. So I will promise to write you, especially if you type in your email address. It's private. I will get right back to you. Remember, even if you in the future miss a webinar, you can access the replay link and email me, kyle@crystalconcentrics.com or kyle@powerstonecrystals.com. And I will be happy to get back to you and get my very next webinar link out to you. So So keep an eye out for my newsletters. Remember, you've got to put me in your address book so that my contact doesn't get lost into the spam department. I'm getting, oh, good answer. Thank you for that. And someone who loves the fuchsite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap out of the room, and I'm going to give you additional pop-up access to the webinar archive that I've got. You'll want to check that out, read the descriptions, and have a sense about what other things that I've talked about. I really appreciate you tuning in. It's been a pleasure. I always love the Q&A, so definitely email me if you didn't get a chance to have your questions answered in this particular webinar. I've got lots of great Why It's Awesome webinars coming your way. So keep an eye out in your inbox. Don't hesitate to write me. And thank you so much for tuning in. Till next time.